Thank you for being the audience today as I discuss with you the origins of standards and leading to the Common Core state standards and what we're doing in California with those standards. Um, the standards go back quite a ways in America, and I'm going to go all the way back to 1894 when they originally, well, when it, some would say that the original group called the Committee of Ten got together and wrote a paper where they suggested that all the kids in America should be educated equally, not only the same amount of education, or at least have access to the same amount of education, but also the same quality of education as well. And for a while, they were working on this and trying to make something of this until in 1918, the NEA got together and wrote something where they suggested that's not a great idea, and that perhaps the people in America should have varying different levels of education based on their interest. To me, interest suggests that they were suggesting that some people may not want a great education, and they may want to go back. They may want to go right into work at an early age and just learn how to do a specific task, and then be able to move out to the world where other people want to get higher education and such. Um, this ended up kind of taking down this whole notion of having a national standard where everybody was learning equally and such. And for quite a number of years, all the way up into the 60s, there seemed to be a lot of different ideas about how we were going to educate Americans, and different fads came in for educational styles, and ideas came and went. But we really didn't seem to be doing a very good job of educating our kids. In the 60s, America got a little bit of a fire underneath us because Russia seemed to be advancing faster than we were with the technical age, as they were trying to head towards the moon, and we were heading towards the moon. And so America started getting more worried about how we were educating, whether we were doing a good job educating our students. It wasn't really until 1983 that a paper was written called "The Nation at Risk" that really sent it out to America that we are not doing a good job with our students. We are not teaching them at the level that we should be. We have a wide variety of education happening in America, where in some states kids are getting far less education than they are in other states. And they found that a very few number of states and districts were teaching kids at the level that they thought should be taught, specifically 4 years of English and 3 years of math in high school and such, and some other levels that they thought we should be teaching. And they were suggesting that we as a nation are really in trouble if we don't listen to that. Also, because it was an issue about the quality of education we were giving our kids, and they wanted to improve that, and that seemed like a great idea. And America started looking into that and thinking, kind of getting fired up about that once again. But once again, something came along to kind of tamper that down, and that was the Reagan administration and the Republicans, and this kind of part of the country that thinks that big government is a bad thing, and that we as a government, or the federal government, should be controlling what we teach in different states. And so that got kind of pushed down, and it seemed to be that the federal government wasn't going to be able to, we weren't going to have a set common standards for all the states, because the federal government had to stay out of it. And all the different states were really wanting to teach whatever they wanted to teach, as we have such a big issue with states' rights in this country. But this was a problem. And the Carnegie Foundation, shortly after A Nation at Risk, found that a lot of businesses were spending a lot of money because they were getting students out of high school that weren't prepared to be working in the business world, and they were ending up spending a bunch of money re-educating the people that they get in. They get a high school student, and they are not prepared to do the types of work that they need to in their businesses, and so they end up spending a lot of money re-educating these people. And so they came up with the idea, or the idea was come up with, that the governors of the different states should get together with business leaders from the country, and that they should work together so that the states could keep autonomy and be able to develop their own standards for their own states, but at the same time they would be able to have standards that were acceptable towards the business world and be higher level standards, so the students would be able to come out of high school with the types of education that the businesses needed and wanted in America. Unfortunately, this is a bit of a problem because business is never going to be completely neutral in the situation, and they have the things that they want students to be learning that are not necessarily the best things for students to be the best things for overall for the students, and more geared towards what's best for the businesses out there in the world. So this was starting in the 80s, and through the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s, this continued as different businesses helped to, and there were these different educational meetings where they got together and they worked together as governors across the country to create these different standards for the different states. But as the 2000s started coming to an end, we started getting closer to 2010, like 2008, 2009. It became more and more clear that we still weren't creating the types of students coming out of our schools that were really good thinkers, problem solvers, critical thinkers. They still weren't getting the right types of education that we wanted them to get, the business leaders wanted them to get, and we weren't creating the successful business people that we needed in this country. And part of that problem was, once again, inconsistency, because when you have different states creating all their own standards and they could pretty much do whatever they want, you're going to find that one student in one area of the country is going to be getting a vastly different education than a student in another area of the country. And there are whole areas of this country where the predominant theory or idea is that certain types of education are better than others, and that level of education is not as important, and they don't necessarily push people students as hard as they should, or they equally, I should say. So in the late 2000s, they started coming up with ideas of perhaps they didn't need to have every state be exactly the same in everything they teach, but they just needed to have a certain set of standards, common core standards, that each state would hit, where all second graders in all the different states would be able to do this standard, and this standard. There's a bunch of other standards that they learn in the different states, but standard A, B, and C, every second grader in the entire country is able to perform those standards. And then there's the same things for level 4th grade and 8th grade and then 10th grade and so forth. There's different levels of standards where every student who gets past the 4th grade in America should be able to do these specific standards. Okay, these standards are written for the 21st century, yes. And so they require a higher level of thinking. And so the new standards that they're coming up with are based much more on the constructivism theory of learning, where the students are using much higher order learning or education or thinking. They are doing much more in the way of problem solving and critical thinking. They are learning to not only take in information, but they're also learning to use that information in a proper way to be able to accomplish something with that information. They're not just learning that 5 plus 5 is 10. They're learning to use the fact that 5 plus 5 is 10 in order to solve problems in their own lives and understand the world around them and speak about how they understand the world around them, which is creating the concept is that we'll be creating a much more intelligent population. Okay? So that's what the Common Core State Standards is about. But unfortunately, there is, at this point, there's a lot of bickering in the country about the Common Core State Standards, because it still does look to a lot of people in this country as government control, federal government control, and that doesn't seem to be sitting well with a lot of people in this country. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation.
It was fun. The end.